Outstanding, the ultimate accolade for teachers. We challenge secondary history teacher Esther Arnott to go from good to outstanding. A top inspector observes one lesson. 2 experts will fine-tune her practice and help improve her presentation. She also gets comments and advice from teachers across the country who've seen her lesson on the web. Esther then has 2 weeks to put all the advice into action before the inspector comes back for the final verdict.
Every single person on here says something different about the lesson. It's been really useful. On the other hand, it's kind of like, oh, it's quite kind of personal. It's in your space. It's in your kind of classroom, even though you don't even know this person.
Lambton School is a large mixed comprehensive in West London, close to Heathrow Airport. Esther Arnott is a history teacher in her 4th year of teaching.
My previous job was working in PR. I used to think it was hard going, having a deadline in the next couple of weeks and working towards that. But teaching, you have 7 deadlines a day.
Right guys, let's get sorted please. Open your books on a fresh page.
On a good day, I love the fact you can't predict what's going to happen. But that can also be the worst thing about teaching as well.
Has anyone got Sanjay's book?
The history department rates her teaching as good.
I think one of Esther's main strengths is, I would always say, an absolute passion for what she teaches.
This thing goes on a horse.
Esther will focus the challenge of getting to outstanding with her Year 7s.
I think what's interesting about a class is the very, very broad range of abilities. And the class as a whole is very enthusiastic and very lively, which is good, but also poses its own challenges.
Okay, everyone, look this way. I think you're getting on well.
Yeah, she's really nice. She gives out merits really easily. She's not too strict, but she is firm when she needs to be.
Okay, so it's really good that you're talking to each other and describing.
Whenever we work, she explains things well, so we understand what she's talking about.
What do good historians do? Can you remember from the very start of the course?
Do they always ask questions?
I don't expect to be the creme de la creme, no way near. I'm certainly not consistent in the amount of time I put into planning versus the amount of time I put into marking. I'm certainly not consistent in the way I actually differentiate my lessons.
I think that for Esther, it's going to be to learn to let go a little bit of the students' learning. I think part of the challenge for Esther is to understand that they don't always need a safety net.
Esther's planning her next lesson on the Norman conquest.
Kind of resources that I need to plan for are, for my EAL students, I need to make sure that they can access this idea of conquest. It's trying to make it obvious through pictures. I've then got to think about the character cards to write and how to make them accessible for all, but more challenging, more detailed breadth and range of information, so the more able to understanding the nuances of the past.
It's the morning of Esther's observation. With hundreds of inspections under her belt, School Inspector Claire Gillies leads teams up and down the country. She certainly knows an outstanding lesson when she sees one.
Okay guys, right, you need to listen very carefully.
Esther has 45 minutes to impress our inspector with her lesson on the impact of William the Conqueror on the English.
I am now William the Conqueror, okay? Here we are. William the Conqueror. I'm glad you found it funny, Palmville. I feel silly. Now, William the Conqueror. I cannot speak in a French accent. I'm not very good when I speak French, but I am now ruling your country and I am taking over. I might be horrible to you, but I might be nice to you.
When she put on the crown, it was really funny. It's like it wasn't in a history lesson anymore. We actually felt like we were there.
What I'd like you to do, I'm not going to wear this anymore, is I would like you, in your pairs or in your groups, you should all find in front of you an envelope. By the end of the task, you should be able to tell me whether William meant your life was better or meant your life was worse?
Polly says, I've heard that William and his soldiers are burning down people's homes. It's been very bad in the north of England and in the south. There are people starving and dying from hunger. They're suffering most.
And these two, I think the one that 10,000 people died is the most.
Let me just reach out.
I think we should get rid of that heading as well, because no one really benefited that much.
Change it, suffered the least.
One people was in charge of the church, and William took his job to his friends. He gave it to his friends.
But what tells you the people of England were happy? Yeah, good.
People like going to church.
Yeah.
Okay, year 7. If I put on this marvellous time-travelling crown again. Now, I am now William. Are you going to tell me that you like me or that you hate me?
I don't want to spend a lot of money, and besides, I need a little more money, so I need some more work.
Well done, Majid. And you got into roll. Round of applause for Majid. That was fantastic. Well done. Carolina, why do you like me?
Because I met one of your soldiers and I fall with him in love.
Oh! Look for any evidence that maybe the English are getting a better life too. It's never black and white. It's always a bit multicoloured and a bit tangled. Find the detail for me.
Miss, what sentence can we do for this one then?
Now you can decide. How about you say there were some things which were good and bad? 50-50. Yeah, and then explain why you think that. So, headline number 1. Please vote if you like headline number 1. Evil comes to England. Right? That could be a headline. Second headline. Out, out, out. William must go. Last but not least. From bad to good, William gets better. Ooh. Please, will you put your books in a pile in the middle of your desk?
So how did Esther get on?
Well, thank you very much, Esther, for letting me watch that Norman Conquest lesson, and certainly for me the highlight, and I'm sure they're going to go out remembering it, was you putting the crown on and talking with that wonderful sort of French accent. No, it really got them thinking, and you could just see how they were all absolutely hooked. So that was a brilliant idea, and certainly I'm going to plunge straight in and say that there were lots of undoubtedly outstanding elements within the lesson, and the one thing that perhaps holds it back from being outstanding was, if I look at the tables, there were 2 tables who they were getting there but a bit slowly and a bit switch off when you weren't doing that gentle nudging. And I was trying to think, how could you have simplified that more?
What I should have done in hindsight is perhaps spent more time at the front end with those 2 tables being absolutely clear of their steps through the lesson. I want them to kind of, be responsible for their own learning. But
I just put down that always hard to generate independent learning skills with all abilities.
Yes.
I thought the quality of debate in at least 3 of the tables was absolutely great. The fact that they actually changed the wording on the sheet you gave them. They didn't want to have benefited but just suffered less. That shows what real thinking was going on that table.
I was absolutely thrilled. That's a little sort of eureka moment, if you like, for those students, in the sense that they were really pushing me on, which was excellent.
It would have been just lovely at the end to sort of have a quick reflection to modern times. Just remember that now, just as in the past.
Yeah.
But there was so much that was great. Thank you very much indeed.
No, thank you for coming.
Look forward to seeing the next one.
Oh, fingers crossed. Thank you.
With the first observation over, the inspector highlighted Esther's need to keep all students equally engaged, shaping the structure of her lessons to enable the students to be more effective, independent learners. It's time to bring on the experts. To boost Esther's progress, help comes from secondary history expert Michael Riley and voice and communications coach Ulrike Schultebauchlo.
I cannot speak in a French accent.
They start by watching Esther's lesson.
I might be horrible to you, but I might be nice.
Great to see the impact of Esther in role and the way in which the class kind of light up.
I think in general she's a brilliant communicator.
Are you going to tell me that you like me or that you hate me?
But what I noticed is that she actually is restricting herself, particularly this kind of hand rubbing and so on. And this has also an effect on her voice.
In your pairs or in your groups, you should all find...
I think there are particular things that I'd like to work on with Esther. There was a great chunk in the middle of the lesson of more than 20 minutes where the pupils were focused on one activity and there was some drift at that point. Esther, thinking about your planning and planning for pupil engagement and challenge in the learning, and instead of thinking about organising learning around key questions for individual lessons, we place this lesson in a broader sequence of learning around what we would call an inquiry question, a historical inquiry question, where we start with the question, the inquiry question, as opposed to, and it might be the same one, just broadened out.
Right.
But then we think how individual lessons then can be sequenced, best sequenced, so that by the end of it, pupils have answered this important big historical question. The key to this is making sure that we're setting out at the beginning of this process with a historical question that is valid, that has historical rigour, that is engaging for students. You know, questions like how did Anglo-Saxons react to Norman invasion, or what was the impact of the Norman conquest on English people. And that then, in the end, we can define an end product that will enable students to answer this question, enable them to engage with it, and is a really interesting thing for them to produce.
In order to be outstanding, I personally believe that I need to differentiate, and I need to differentiate for the 3 or 4 different groups of abilities, if you like.
One of your great strengths as a teacher is your inclusion. Perhaps, ironically in a sense, you are doing that at the expense of whole class teaching. So instead of planning one big task, think about planning sequenced activities that take pupils up, deeper into the inquiry, more complex levels of understanding. And within each one, providing some extra challenge, providing some extra support for those students who need it.
That's really useful.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's incredibly useful.
I might be horrible to you, but I might be nice to you.
The other dimension of teaching that I think would be really good to build on, your willingness to go into role, which here was great, you know, because it added drama to the lesson. And I think there are a lot more ways in which, as history teachers, we can add drama to our lessons and avoid pupil drift. The fact that, you know, if you hunt in the King's Forest, what do you think happens to you? You lose 2 fingers. Pause. Do you know what happens to you if you're caught a second time? No. Your eyes are gouged out. And it's at moments like that, really, when you have kind of total engagement. And some of that can be elicited from them. Who's found something really scary on their cards? And take that as your way in.
What I like you now is to take your feet a bit further than shoulder wide. Stretch your right hand, raise up, and bend over to your...
Esther and Ulrika loosen up before working on Esther's hand rubbing.
Don't hold your breath. Breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth. Keep your hands folded.
Feel all the tension flowing out of me.
Good. So now comes my little surprise.
Okay.
I have here 2 balloons for you. And what I like here is to put one underneath this arm, one underneath that arm.
I can't touch my hands anymore.
You can't touch your hands. So